Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we're here with more 90s attitude than usual. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I'm joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great. I cannot believe that we are at the end.
We're at the end of this year. Yeah.
And mere days away from a new Matrix movie.
Yeah. And mere days away from a new Matrix movie, just a couple days after a new Spider-Man movie, and a week after a new West Side Story. Like, what is happening? It's a weird world we're living in, Mark.
It is, but I'm loving it.
And a Merry Almost Christmas to you.
A Merry Almost Christmas to you as well, Patrick.
We are celebrating the holidays this year, of course, by doing 2 episodes about Sega Genesis games that appear on the Nintendo Switch. Sorry, the Sega Genesis Nintendo Switch Online library. And this is the first of those 2 episodes. This will be the only episode that we put out this week, and we will only put out 1 episode next week as well. So apologies in advance for that. Today we're going to be talking about 3 games. We're going to be talking about Gunstar Heroes, Ristar, and Golden Axe. And then next week we're going to be talking about another 3 games. Mark, you want to walk us through those 3?
Yeah, these were chosen by the random number generator.
All random.
Yeah.
We had no control over these 3.
Week 1, we had control over. We carefully curated and selected these games. Hours of painstaking research.
That's right.
And finger pointing.
It got ugly.
Week 2, completely random.
Right. Also got ugly.
So for week 2, we'll be talking about Phantasy Star 4, The End of the Millennium, Strider, and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine.
Which I'm very excited to dig into all of those games. I can't believe I have assigned myself, or the fates have assigned for me to play like a 70-hour RPG. But I'm into it. I'm into the challenge. Mark, speaking of challenges that you could be into, would you like to borrow my copy of Sonic Forces for the Nintendo Switch? You can certainly try. All you gotta do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and give us a mailing address. We can send you my copy of Sonic Forces for the Nintendo Switch. You play it for as long as you want, or you don't play it at all. You put it back in the mail. You send it back to me. I paid for the postage there. I paid for the postage back. It costs you nothing. It's
a holiday miracle.
Yes, it is truly a holiday miracle. Also sort of a miracle, maybe an anti-miracle. It's hard to say. A copy of Untitled Goose Game might be in there instead of Sonic Forces.
An anti-miracle sounds so dark.
Yeah. Why? I mean, what is an anti-miracle?
I don't know. The mind reels.
I mean, would that be like works of the devil?
Oh, maybe.
Because technically a miracle can only be performed by a saint, right?
I mean, who am I to say?
Saints need to perform miracles before they can attain sainthood. This much I know for
sure.
Yes,
that much I feel confident about.
Okay, great.
Well, here's a miracle that we all can perform in our own lives. Leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We love it so much. It helps people find the show. The perfect holiday gift for Patrick and I. If you leave us a 5-star review on the U.S. Apple Podcast Store, we'll give you a shout out on the show.
Because we will see it.
If you leave us a review anywhere else, we may not see it, but we still want to give you a shout out.
Yes.
So send us an email, hit us up on Twitter. Thank you so much to everybody who has ever left us a review. And thank you to anybody who will in the future. But don't worry, we'll thank you individually given the opportunity.
That's right. And it's not just reviews, anything that you can do to share it or interact. If there's a fave, if you can like, anything along those lines, let us know that you did it and we'll give you a shout out.
If you're home for the holidays,
right?
Like borrow your parents' phone or your sibling's phone.
That's right.
And review our show on their phone. If you've already reviewed it, review it on somebody else's phone.
Yeah, I mean, and also while you're there, just subscribe as well.
Oh, yeah.
Follow the podcast
Absolutely.
there. You know, they look. My parents don't even know they have podcast apps on their phone. I've asked, they've asked like, oh, where can we listen to your podcast? I'm like, I don't know, everywhere. Okay, Mark, let's get into our main topic. Let's discuss some Sega Genesis games. Before we dig into specifics, I wonder if maybe it makes a little sense for us to just sort of place ourselves in, or place the Sega Genesis library in our own personal gaming histories, just so we have an idea of, because, when we're talking about classic Nintendo games, we have such a base of knowledge to draw from and, decades of experience playing these things. But what is your relationship to the Sega Genesis library?
Yeah, I mean, I was such a Nintendo kid growing up. I was not in control of like video game purchases, and my parents were not easily swayed by my wants or wishes. And so we, as a family, got whatever my parents deemed, it was timed for a new console or something.
Yeah.
And so we were always a Nintendo family, and my friends would have Genesis. My cousin would have different video game systems. But that's the only ever time I experienced it was going over to somebody else's houses.
Yeah.
So I never like sampled. Like I never. So playing like Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic 2 at my next door neighbors, it was like, oh, I never got enough time to really like master it or understand it. It was always just the other thing that I knew existed, but I was never focused on it.
Yeah, like in my mind, it sort of it occupies the space that like Xbox does now, where like I know there are games on there and I've messed around with a little bit, but I don't have it in my veins the way I do Nintendo and Sony stuff. Like it's just you're right, like it always feels a little bit like an other to me. We also never had a Genesis growing up. I had friends, of course, that had one, had a system, of course, and then also like 32X and Sega CD. And I mean, my first Sega system, the first Sega thing that I owned was the Dreamcast, was Sega Swan Song, right? So a lot of games in the Sega library, I came to very late, or I came to in like other forms, right? Like we're going to talk about Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine next week, and like I discovered that style of gameplay through Puyo Puyo Tetris on the Switch just a couple of years ago. Like it's the same basic game, but yeah, it feels like looking into an alternate past.
Yeah, I feel like when I play some of these Genesis games, because I have dabbled with Golden Axe, which we're going to talk about today, like at sleepovers and all that kind of stuff, and experiencing it in other forms on other platforms like Sonic collections or Sega Genesis collections. But again, always dabbling, because it never had that same sort of retro gaming, like synapse firing that like the Super Nintendo does for me, even though it's of the same era. And so really, I would say the first kind of like revelation for me was two things. One, listening to the Super Marcato Brothers video game music podcast, where they play a lot of, like other music from the era, just a lot of video game music.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like started to broaden my horizons a lot. And then second, Sonic Mania on the Switch.
Yeah.
Totally, even though it is not a Genesis game, based heavily on the early Sonic the Hedgehog games. And it totally opened my eyes in a way where I'm like, oh, I understand how to play Sonic now in a way that I never did before. Because like it's such a different type of platformer.
Yeah, that he's like momentum based, and like the more you run, the like faster he gets, and all of that stuff.
And then playing the Castlevania collection and having Rondo of Blood on there, and just all these different, I don't know, almost like
Bloodlines.
There
we go.
Right. You're right. All these different gateways kind of into the Genesis, where I was really excited for actually I can't remember if I was really excited, but now I'm very excited for the Sega Genesis being on the Nintendo Switch, because it just seems like it's like a portal to an alternate me being 8 years old.
Right.
And like experiencing these 16-bit games for the first time.
Right, which makes me a little worried that, because we both have expressed that same thought now, makes me worried that we're going to sound like weird aliens to people who grew up with Genesis or who have had Sega in their lives the whole time. This is new for us. We're little Nintendo boys trying to figure out what it must have been like to be 8 and have access to a different system as a child. was gonna say something else about the. Oh, so yeah. What are your like initial responses just to like the way these games sound? Because I would say that like the sound and the visual, everything is different, which is what kind of throws me, right? That the games feel different, they look different, and they sound different from Nintendo games. So let's just start with the sound because that one seemed most obvious to me.
Yeah.
How's that feel to you?
I feel like the Genesis in general has a more harsh sound to it.
Mhm.
It almost reminds me of like the Game Boy or the Game Boy Advance in the sense that like it feels like it's harder to compose for.
Yeah,
And
possibly.
so it doesn't sound like so sharp. Maybe that's what I'm responding to. Is it sounds so much like sharper
Yeah.
than the Super Nintendo, which does all have this really like reverby sense to the whole thing.
Well, and the Super Nintendo had all of these like um all these patches that sounded like real instruments but like kind of wonky versions of them. And the Genesis seems like it's just going for like synth noises, right? Like the closest that I think I heard playing any of the games this week to like hearing something that sounded like an actual instrument was the harpsichord sound in the when you're in Golden Axe, when you're kicking the little dwarves around the campsite. It sort of sounds like a harpsichord, but like with distortion on it because everything on the Genesis sounds like it has distortion on it. Okay, well, should we just get into the actual games now?
Yeah.
Okay. Mark, I played Gunstar Heroes. You played Ristar. We both played Golden Axe. Where would you like to start?
I would love to hear about Gunstar Heroes.
So Gunstar Heroes is a treasure game, so created by a fabled studio that originally was like an outcropping of Konami. But when they were showing Konami what they were working on, they were like, no, we don't like it. And so they're like, okay, well, then we're going off on our own. And they made this. It's like a side-scrolling run and gun shoot 'em up kind of game where you are there are maybe 2 or 3 Gunstar heroes. It's unclear to me what the characters are, but you can play the game 2 players at once, and they're like identical characters. One of them is they're different colors. And you're trying to rescue their brother who is like defected to the evil empire. And the art style in this game is so like it's almost like a anime by way of Ren and Stimpy almost, but without like the gross out quality to it. Like everyone has that sort of like lean, kind of like bendy quality to them. And then it's all like robots and guns and stuff. And so the way the game is set up is right at the beginning you make a couple selections, including what your base gun is going to be. And there are 4 types of weapon. There's rapid fire, there's homing, there's electricity, and there's fire. And then as you're playing through the game, you can pick up those same 4 like abilities again, and combine them with the weapon you have. So like electricity shoots through things, and fire deals more damage at close range, but it doesn't have as long range. Homing obviously homes the things, and the fast stuff obviously shoots fast. So you can combine like fast with fire, you can combine fast with homing, you can like combine all of these things together. So it's, 16 different combinations, because it also counts like doubling up. Like fire on fire means you have like a big flamethrower that's super powerful up front, but has like almost no distance. So you're sort of like juggling these power-ups as you are making your way through these levels.
So my kind of like reference for these side-scrolling shoot 'em up type games, in my head, I think of games like Contra. Is
Or
this
Metal
like
Slug.
Yeah, is this like a similar experience or like based on that sort of mechanic?
Yeah, so it is a similar experience. I would say it feels more like Metal Slug in that Metal Slug does a great job of presenting like a story that's happening that sort of like plays out in the background or like as you are just progressing through it. There's a little bit of dialogue in Gunstar Heroes here and there, but by and large, like you're having each level tells like a discrete little story, and it comes to like a logical end by the boss, right? And each of those things is like cool and unique. And the very first level is like the most basic one that you encounter, where it's the bad guys, the Empire, are like raiding this village with all these like tiny native people. And when I say tiny, like they, in the world of the game, they're probably a foot tall or something.
Okay.
And so that's like the most normal one, where it's just like it's a jungle. You're fighting the bad guys. There are natives running around, like and then you get to the end of it, and you fight a thing that has been like a logging robot, right? That's been like tearing everything down. So like there's a little bit of a story there, but it's not super novel. It's kind of like video game standard, right? But the second level is the first 4 levels you can actually approach in any order you want. It gives you like a level select, which tricked me into thinking I was way further into the game than I thought I was at one point. But the second level that you have access to is a minecart level, which like the twist on that is you're still like shooting in all directions, and bad guys come at you from everywhere, and you're still like collecting the power-ups. But there's a track on the floor and a track on the ceiling, and at any point you can jump. You can like press jump again while you're in the air to like switch gravity so that you are now on the top. And then there's also parts where instead of it scrolling from left to right, it scrolls up and down, and you can choose which side of like the crevasse you're like going down on this thing. And it's just like it's stuff like that every level is unique and presents like a very different experience of what the core mechanics of the game are.
Yeah, that's really cool, because it sounds like, when I think of those like Contra or Metal Slug type games, I really think of that kind of like Rambo energy of the late 80s and early 90s, and this feels like it's kind of like playing with that idea.
Yeah, well, and this game came out in 1993, so it would have had a couple Contra games to look at and be like, okay, well, like what can we do better here? What can we take a little less seriously? And like you see that in the boss design and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing what Treasure got out of the Genesis. And mind you, 1993 is kind of late in the life cycle, right? Like it's getting up there. But there's so many like layers of like parallax scrolling, and it scrolls so fast, like it is shocking. This minecart level that I was telling you about, you get going so like everyone else is going fast too, so it doesn't seem like it, but the background is whizzing away behind you. There's the third level is an airship level where you are like storming an airport, just all like side scrolling, right? And then there is like a rocket that is basically taking off, and you have to like jump up platforms along the side of it to like keep up with it. And eventually like you get to the top of the rocket and like grab on. And by this point, all of the platforms that you were like climbing up before are like just falling away so fast. It's incredible how fast the game feels.
That sounds really, really cool.
It's so dope. I really, I mean, I don't know if I said it like ahead of time. This game rules.
Okay.
Like Gunstar Heroes is super fun.
Well, I feel like the thing for me that always prevents me from enjoying these types of games is that they are, one, usually kind of monotonous, and when they have platforming, it's terrible. But 2, they're very hard. Like they're just like ridiculously difficult.
So there are difficulty settings on this. There's I think easy, normal, hard, and expert. I played through it all the way on normal, and I did sample it a little bit on easy to see like how what that experience was like, and it was too easy. So I mean it's attainable on normal, especially if you're abusing the rewind function a little bit. And actually kind of a lot by the end, because the end level is a little tough, a little grueling to get through. But I really liked this game. I'm just gonna go through some of the other like gimmicks of the levels, just so we can talk about them. The fourth level is called Strange Fortress. It's a like a board game. So like you get to a point maybe like halfway through where there is just genuinely like a board game, like a board, and a die like appears, and you have to pick it up and throw it and to like roll the die, and then it moves a little piece on the game board, and whatever it lands on, you either like get a power up or have to fight an enemy or go back to the beginning or whatever.
Sorry, I'm trying to imagine the setup. So
yeah,
you are still just doing a side scrolling
shoot 'em up,
but then like almost like a mini map on the screen or taking over
Yes.
other real
Yes.
estate is this board game.
Yes, and
That's
so
so
you
funny.
and like a die falls, and it's one of the cool things. Like for the most part, you are really just shooting, running, and jumping. But when you get close to enemies and you push the shoot button, you like kind of throw them. So yeah, you throw the die in that same way, and it comes up and you have to like fight. Sometimes it's like a horde of enemies, sometimes it's a boss style character. And another thing that they do really well in this game is that they're doing something to approximate 3D graphics. That there are like enemies that are made up of polygons that you have to fight, which is wild. And I'm not really sure how they were able to do that on the Genesis. Because like to my knowledge, like I just don't know how. I didn't know the Genesis could do that at all. Okay, so that's that one is this like strange board game. Then you have to do the Empire like launches their ship into space off of Earth, and so you get in a spaceship and you are like flying around like Gradius style, and there's a whole level of that. Which at first I was like, oh no, I hate this. But it turns out that they like took everything that worked about the regular game and like just put it in space, and it's like, okay, this actually works a ton. And then the final level is you see what's happening on a monitor that all of the previous bosses that you fight are watching. So like you can see them like reacting and like sending each other out to like go fight you again. And so like one of them will like leave the screen, and then you encounter them just a second later. And when you get through all of that, you can see on the monitor, you like walk through a door, and then like you walk like through the door into the room that they are watching it in. It's super cool. Like the way that it just like presents these like tiny little character moments just throughout the whole game, but especially in this final level, is just so immersive and engaging.
That's so fun. So it can be played with 2 players. If you're playing by yourself, does it have like a computer character follow? Okay.
No. If you're playing by yourself, it's just you. It is a game that I would like to play with you sometime, or with just with a second player. But I did go solo on it.
It sounds awesome. Like it really does sound really
it's
cool.
Great. The music I didn't find to be a standout necessarily, but it's such a like kind of visual feast. And also with any game like this, you're shooting the entire time, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're just holding down the fire button. So most of what you hear is just, which kind of drowns out any music stuff that you're gonna listen to.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good like pick.
I picked it because I had messed around with just like a little bit of the first level and was like, oh, that was interesting. I like this style of game, at least I like messing around with it. But this feels like, and like as I played it, I could feel myself like understanding the systems of it. And like I never got into a situation where it's like, in those games, there's always like some kind of bullet hell that you can't get out of, and you're like, well, this isn't fair. I never got into those situations. Like I always understood my character's mobility enough to get around or get away from things that were threatening to me.
Do you know, is Gunstar Heroes Genesis exclusive? Like, did it start life as an arcade game and then become get a port, or is it?
No, so it was designed for the Sega Genesis. It was one of the things that Treasure was doing. Like they were accessing its technology specifically, which is why it features all of the like fast scrolling stuff and whatever the heck they're doing for those like polygon graphics that are in there. They were developing this and a McDonald's game at the same time.
Crazy.
And they finished the McDonald's game first, but we're like, no. We're going to put Gunstar Heroes out first, and then we'll put out McDonald's, so people don't know us as the McDonald's game company. And it makes me want to play that McDonald's game because it's that good.
It makes me the reason I ask is because you were talking about like bullet hell situations that are like impossible to get out of, and I feel like Golden Axe, a game that we'll talk about later, no
spoilers,
like because of its arcade origins, has those moments where you're like, well, you're just not playing fair with me,
right? Well, and there's Gunstar Heroes does have a an infinite continue, just like base. That's what it normally is. You can always continue, and continuing doesn't necessarily kick you all the way back to the beginning of the level. There are some like checkpoints halfway through, and then it starts you with like full life again. So like there were a lot of the final boss of the game. I got to him with, maybe like a tenth of my full health and was like, uh-oh, I'm gonna be destroyed here. And of course I was, but then I continued and started me right back there again, which was great because otherwise I don't know how I would have done that.
Yeah, this sounds like a great game. It sounds like it'd be a lot of fun to play in co-op.
Yeah, super fun. Like genuinely feels like an action classic. Get a little bit vibes of Mega Man. You also have like a slide. So like some of the boss fights. No, here's what I really got vibes of is Cuphead. That this game feels like the same sort of balance between like challenging boss fights that you need to like memorize a pattern, and like short little levels with minimal platforming, but it's mostly like run and gun shooting. And Cuphead has the benefit of the art style is amazing, and you feel like you're interacting with like an old-timey cartoon. Thing is, we're far enough away from when this style of graphics was in vogue that like it feels similarly like looking into a like bizarro mirror of the past, right? And seeing all of this like cool 16-bit pixel art. I know it's not exactly the same, but like it feels pretty similar to the experience of playing Cuphead.
Should we move on to Ristar?
Let's move on to Ristar.
Okay.
I have actually no idea what Ristar is.
Okay, I didn't really either. I knew it was a platformer.
You told me it was a platformer.
It is. I knew that it was a platformer, and that's all I really knew about it. And I love platformers, but I 100% have a bias towards the Mario style of platforming, right? And so anytime I approach, start a new platformer, I have this bad habit of being like, oh, this game isn't fun.
Right.
Or
which you just mean this game isn't Mario.
And it's not even like this game isn't Mario. It's like Mario is so ingrained in me that I forget that it was not always ingrained in me. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Where it's like now, like, pick up a Mario game, pick up Super Mario Brothers, and like the momentum, like all of that is just second nature.
You're holding B to run.
Exactly. So I start a new platformer, and I'm immediately like, oh, this isn't good. Like, I don't understand it. I'm not like a master at it immediately, right? I die, like all that kind of stuff. And right, so that is unfortunately like the attitude that I went in with Ristar went, but by the like third level, I was like, oh, okay, I'm kind of getting this. And then the fourth level, it starts changing things up in a way that I was like, oh, this is like really cool. Ristar is awesome. I loved Ristar.
Oh no, Mark, did we have a great time playing games this week?
Ristar was such a surprise for me. So here is the game. One of the things that's really cool about it is there's two mechanics to the entire game. And basically it's just how like playing with those mechanics. You can jump and your arms extend and you can grab things.
You say you, what am I?
Okay, so great question. You are a little like black dot with like extendy arms. You're almost like you have the bounce. I'm doing a terrible job of describing this because basically you are like a black dot with arms that have like the little Mickey Mouse gloves.
Okay.
And legs with feet that have Sonic-esque sneakers. I think they're red with like lightning bolts on them or something like that. And then your face is a star. Is like an enormous star.
Okay.
So you are like a black dot with a star for a face.
Sure, you've been possessed by Starro.
And so you cannot run in this game. You always walk. Well, for the most part, unless you're like sliding on ice or something. You always walk at kind of a little bit slow pace. Like I do wish there was a way to move a little bit faster, but it really is like jumping and your arms extend and you can grab things. And that is how you traverse levels. And it's also how you attack enemies. You cannot jump on enemies. It is all you grab them, you extend your arms, you grab them, and then you either pull the enemy towards you or you go towards it. And you like headbutt it. and then that's how you damage enemies. And so the game is basically just like, how do we take those two mechanics and start like messing with it, and like how far can we push it? So the first 3 levels, each level is like pretty standard video game fare. There's like the fire level, there's the forest level, there is the ice level, like all that kind of stuff. And it's really just kind of teaching you the mechanics of the game. You can extend your arms in 8 directions depending on like how you're holding the D-pad.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of like mobility potential.
That's interesting, and also was true of Gunstar Heroes, is that it was very interested in your ability to point the gun in all 8 directions. So that's just to note, Genesis was interested in all 8 of the cardinal directions.
And then there's also like this sense of discovery where you hit this point and you're like, how do I get high enough in order to like keep climbing? And you do it by, you can kind of like grab onto a wall, and you can't wall climb, but you can kind of like bounce off of it. And so you can kind of make your way like up, like there's a little bit of momentum. The whole like movement through the level, it is not Sonic-esque, it is not Mario-esque. It's very much its own thing. But there is a sense of rhythm to it, because there will be like horizontal and vertical poles that you can grab onto and kind of like swing around. And so you can build up momentum and move fairly quickly through certain sections of it.
Yeah.
But really where it becomes interesting to me was, again, this 4th level, which was it's like Sonata World or something like that. And the first level in it, instead of just trying to traverse, the first thing you see is this little metronome that's going back and forth. And you have to pick it up, and basically you have to carry this metronome through the level. And so figuring out ways where it's like, okay, well, there's like fire right here. So how do I like get the metronome to the next part? Because you either have to like deposit it. There's this like grabber claw that'll pick it up, or there's a bird that when you take it, the bird flies off and starts singing, and the bird takes it to the next part of the level. Like, yeah, it was really, so it was taking this idea of like, okay, you can jump and you can grab things, and now let's totally start messing with it.
Yeah. How far did you get in this game?
So I beat it.
Okay.
And it's not that long. It's only 6 levels, and then in each, 6 worlds or zones, they maybe call it. But anyways, planets. I think they're planets.
Okay, very good.
You're a star. I think they're planets. But there's 6 of them.
I believe you described the character as a black dot.
It is. It's a black. It's okay. Here's the story.
Yeah.
Kaiser Greedy is taking over, like mind controlling all these different planets, and so this group of aliens basically like prays to the son of the great hero, who is you, Ristar. You're this black dot with a star for your face, and you come down and you're like, all right, I'm gonna like kick
Punch, it's all in the mind.
Yeah. Trash. So I can't remember where. Oh,
right.
Planets.
Yes. This by
6 planets.
6 planets. Yes.
2 levels in each planet and a boss, and then the final boss.
That's so interesting, because like that's the Sonic.
It's very
format.
Sonic-esque. So it was built on the Sonic engine.
Here we go.
By an offshoot of Sonic Team. It came late to the system. It came, I think it was like 1995.
Yeah, that's right.
And it has, so not only when you see the like planet for the first time, or when it's like introducing the planet, it has that same sort of like zone, like,
okay, yeah, sure. That kind of like overlay.
Zone, yeah, exactly. Like overlay, like that is very reminiscent of Sonic. The graphics in general are fairly reminiscent of Sonic, being on that engine.
Yeah, it looks like I'm looking at screenshots now, like very colorful.
How would you describe Ristar? If not a dot with
I would describe him as a star with Mickey Mouse arms and legs. Like I don't think I would really rest too much on the fact that
with the black dot.
the black dot.
I can see how that would be confusing and misleading, and yet
that's exactly how you want to describe it. Okay, so Mark, it sounds like you really like how's the music in the game?
It's fine.
Okay.
It
I feel like that's going to be a recurring theme for us.
I feel like there are elements of it. There are certain song like melodies that are really good, but overall, there was nothing that like. I don't think I'm going to be listening to the Ristar soundtrack after the fact.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was going to say is that just like in Sonic, how there are bonus levels within levels, there's a similar mechanic in Ristar where there will be like a pole that you can hold onto, and they occur at the end of levels, but also like within levels. And if you spin on them, you hold onto it with your arms, hold the D-pad in a single direction, and you will start spinning at it at great speed, and then you can fling yourself off into these bonus levels, which are basically like you have 60 seconds to platform, basically momentum swing your way to a treasure chest that's up in like the corner or something.
Yeah.
And if you do that in 60 seconds, and then at the end of every level, there's another one of these poles that you can swing on, and you get bonus points for how high you can fling yourself. And so like those elements also feel like Sonic-esque.
Yeah.
The other part that made me think like definitely, because this was developed again by Sega, so definitely you could see how this was influenced by Sonic. We never got a sequel to Ristar, but they talked about in some of the stuff I was reading that the developers talked about if they were going to make a sequel, there would be like 2 other of these star buddies, and they would have different, like their legs would be crazy, or they could do something with their hair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very similar to like Tails and Knuckles.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting, like the stretchy arms and like building momentum like through that sounds a lot like Knuckles Chaotix on the 32X, which was a game where you controlled like 2 of like Knuckles' friends, and they were like tethered by like a magical rope, so you would have to like get them to kind of like slingshot each other around. So I wonder if they just like implemented a lot of those same systems in like another game the next year. When did the 32X come out? No one knows.
Well, I think I don't know. I especially don't know. This part of the Sega timeline gets blurry to me. Like the 32X,
well, it's messy
the
too.
Saturn,
right.
Like all of this was
right.
To me is all happening at the same time. I know that this game was coming out around the same time as the Saturn, and that kind of stole its thunder.
Yeah, I mean by 95, that's a year out from the Nintendo 64, right? Like we are nearing the end of the 16-bit console's lifespan.
But yeah, I really liked this game. It was one where once it clicked, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And it was fun to see all the different ways that they take those 2 simple mechanics and just like keep messing with them.
Okay, Mark, so we are 2 for 2 at the moment. 2 games that we tried to 2 games that we really liked, right?
Right.
Okay, so now we are going to move on to Golden Axe, which we have both messed with in the past, right?
Yeah, it's probably this Genesis game that I have played the most of ever before this.
Yeah, I think probably me too. And also, like, I played it in the arcade some too. Like, it is such what Golden Axe is a side-scrolling beat 'em up, just like all the classic beat 'em ups, that has a sort of like medieval fantasy setting, and you control one of 3 characters: a dwarf, a barbarian, and like a lady barbarian
who's maybe a witch or warlock or something.
Well, hold on. I was curious, so I looked it up, and here's what Wikipedia says about the game's 3 heroes. One of them is a battle axe wielding dwarf, Gilius Thunderhead.
Love it.
From the mines of Wolud, whose brother was killed by soldiers of the Death Adder. Another is a male barbarian named Axe Battler, wielding a 2-handed broadsword, looking for revenge, blah, 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 blah. The last is a longsword wielding Amazon, Tiris Flare, whose parents were killed by the Death Adder. She's an Amazon.
Okay.
Which is just, skimpy armor and a sword, right?
So as a kid, this game really spoke to me because I really liked that fantasy setting.
Me
and all
too.
That kind of stuff.
Yes.
It was very Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, so there was a Dungeons and Dragons Capcom beat 'em up around the same time, maybe a couple years later, that is way deeper and way longer and has this sort of like Capcom beat 'em up thing happening to it where like every level looks totally different and the monsters are huge and crazy and the characters have all these cool spells and special abilities. And Golden Axe is not quite that.
No.
Golden Axe is I feel like limited is the word I want to use to describe it. You just have access to these 3 characters and they can swing their weapon, they can do like a dash attack, and they can jump and do like a jump attack. And sort of that's it. They also have magic, I guess, that they can use as they collect these little like magic bottles that are really just like area effect spells, right? Like
Right.
there are no buffs. There's no like poison magic or anything like that nerfs your opponent or anything like that. So it feels the experience is very limited.
Yeah, and as far as I could tell, there is no way to block attacks, which makes for a lot of frustration.
Yeah. Well, and like once you get in, not only is it limited, it's sort of slow, right? Like once you get your character locked in like a combo, they're sort of stuck doing that combo. Once an enemy starts doing a combo to you, there's no way that you can get out of it. And when you cast a magic spell, my God, it takes. I know it's like 4 seconds or whatever, but I'm like, I can't believe the game stops basically.
Yeah.
For the whole spell to just play out like that.
The other way that I feel like it's limited is that you can tell that there's a lot of imagination like into it. Like they talk about you're on the back of a giant turtle and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that a town is on the back of a giant turtle.
And you're like, oh, that's so awesome. Like that's such a fun idea. But then the execution of it is
you see so little of it.
It's just it looks just like a normal town, but then you see like the eye of a turtle, like you see a head at the beginning, but then that's it.
Right.
And it just feels like such a missed opportunity.
I do like the drawing of the turtle on the map after you complete the level.
Yes.
That's cute. Like there's a turtle, it's just like drawn in red on this map and there are like little buildings on a turtle's back. That's neat. And like all of the those moments between the levels where they bring you back to that map and like play a sort of like haunting little tune and just state where you're headed next. The game is interested in telling you a like medieval fantasy story.
Yeah, in its own way.
Yeah, in its own
presentation isn't bad.
Fairly
oh my gosh!
limited
Speaking
way.
of presentation, I have to mention this about Ristar.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
This is the game about the black dot
with a star for a face.
With a star for a face. Okay.
At the end of it,
I'm just saying you described his feet before you got to the star.
For the most part, Ristar is fairly free of like the same radical blue raspberry 90s attitude that Sonic embodied for Sega. But it is not entirely free of it. I laughed really, really hard because at the very end of the game, you defeat the bad guy, his castle collapses, you see Ristar like shoot across the screen, flying away. Everything fades to black, the music fades out, and you hear this really tinny, awful voice sample saying, "Hasta la vista."
Wow.
Which, Terminator 2 had come out 3 or 4 years before.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I guess it was probably still in the consciousness. So that made me laugh. It's the only time Ristar ever talks.
Hasta la vista?
I thought it was so funny.
Wow, that is weird. Well, I mean, the like really tinny voice samples, totally relevant to the game that to Golden Axe,
yes.
right? Because every time you kill an enemy, it screams. Every single time. That's how you know they're dead.
Yeah, it really is kind of the only way you know they're dead because so much of the combat is like bashing enemies 3 times on the head where they go, and it goes thud, 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 and then you pick them up and you throw them off screen.
Right.
And the only way you know they're not going to come back
is when they go, ah! Yeah, and you will frequently be asking yourself as you play this game, is that guy dead yet?
Yeah.
Because these enemies, sponges for damage, they just take it and take it and take it.
This is where Golden Axe's Genesis as a arcade title
totally
really, in my opinion, hurts the game on Genesis.
Yeah, I agree with that too. There is a a code that you can input that'll give you 9 credits, so 9 different opportunities to continue. It normally starts you with 6, so like it's sort of a benefit, but that's not like that big, right? We never got the code to work, but I saw that it's there. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer that they limit your credits at all.
Yeah, and as far as I can tell, there's no way to earn credits, because I feel like it'd
Yes,
be different
yes.
if the game was keeping it. Obviously, I'm assuming it's keeping track of your stats. It must be keeping track of your stats.
Yeah, because it grades you at the end.
Yeah, so if you kill a certain number of enemies or whatever, you earn more credits, but there is none of that, and so it's just when you're playing in co-op, it's just the 6 credits, and that's it.
Another thing about the co-op mode, which Mark and I did for the purposes of this show, we did play the whole thing in co-op. Not that we beat it. We were destroyed by the final boss, who is just too hard.
It's really unfair because there's 2 of these skeleton enemies, which are probably the second hardest enemies in the game. They have a tendency to like gang up on you. They're just really challenging. And then the final boss, the adder, who uses area of attack magic like crazy.
Yes. Also, we like area of attack, every time he hits you, he throws it so like he can deal a bar's worth of damage and then cast a magic spell to deal another bar's worth of damage to everyone. So this character is the Deathbringer, and that level was only added in the home version. So the Death Adder, the actual like bad guy, is the one that you fight before going into that final area. This is all stuff that I was reading right before we started recording. You and I had asked, hey, should we deal with these skeletons before? Because they like interrupt your attacks. They're a real pain in the butt. They evidently have 3 times as much health as the Deathbringer himself. And so this walkthrough recommends that you just go for, but they're like, mostly you're not going to beat them.
Got it.
So, which is a little... It's a little bit of a bummer, but like it's funny approaching it where you fight the Death Adder, you beat him, and the like king and queen or prince and princess or whatever they are have been like strung up and they're like lowered down into the arena so you can like talk to them one more time. They're very funny little graphics.
Yeah, they are, and I mean, it feels very rudimentary.
Yeah,
but parts of it like really delighted me or made me laugh. Like there's these little 2-legged pink and like yellow lizard things that you can ride around.
Yes.
And they like stick their tongue out when you're riding them, like they're upset.
Yeah,
that you're on them. Like that's really fun.
They're very strange, and they're like other sort of like more normal dragons that you can ride. But these like little ones are just like little bulbs with a tail.
Like, they feel very like heavy metal in a way that nothing really else in the game does. But I feel like
I think the Lady Barb, the Amazon, she feels like heavy metal.
Yeah.
The only character in the game with like sculpted butt cheeks is this Amazon character.
I mean, it's beautiful. Though.
It is.
Like,
it is a beautiful butt. Yeah.
Went into that butt.
I wish the male barbarian also, because he's wearing also just like a little blue
Speedo.
Speedo.
His butt totally
right.
Could, and the dwarf too. They all could.
I don't need that. I don't need a cute dwarf butt. But yeah, there was another thing that just like the like funny design of it. Oh, the game will throw these like little gnome characters at you from time to time and between levels that just there's a green one and a blue one, and the blue one has magic and the green one has health, and you just kick them and they give you either magic potion or food to heal you. And that's just like what a funny way to like dole out the reward for, like, in Ninja Turtles you find like a pizza box and they eat pizza and they heal up. In this you have to kick the gnome to get these power-ups.
I feel like for Golden Axe I have like a begrudging respect for it. I had fun playing it with you.
Yes.
I do not know that I would have fun playing this game on my own.
Yeah.
But I really did come to I had fun because we got better.
And this is the part that boggled my mind, because in all of these kinds of games, all of them, from Final Fight to everything else on the Capcom beat 'em up bundle, all of these kinds of games, I'm like, they're the same, right? Like, you're going to see some cool stuff, but how good you are at them or how good you are at a specific game doesn't matter, right? It's just, do you have enough credits to get through it? But we got so much better at this game as we played it.
Yeah. We played it over a couple of days.
Yeah.
And the first time we played it, we played like 4 or 5 rounds, and each time we incrementally got better.
Yeah.
And then the second time when we got together to play it, I mean, we couldn't beat that last boss, but we
got
kinda
to him.
rocked it.
Yeah, like we were in control of the enemy, like, and even starting to be like, oh, no, hold on, there's one of these things up here, or like, you can't stand next to him when he wakes up because he's gonna swing an axe at you or whatever, or like the enemies that are just like big bald guys, that come out of that Deb door. There's a door that's just labeled Deb, and 2 of these guys come out of it, and it doesn't make any sense, unless their name is Deb, which I'm willing to believe.
I would like that.
When the first time we were playing,
collectively,
we are Deb. The first time we were playing, they were tough. They were like intimidating, and this time we just sort of like mopped the floor with them.
Yeah, and even it just reminded me of the simple joys of these types of arcade games.
Yes,
and being able to play them free of having to pump quarters into it, where it's just like we were able to we would get back to a section, we'd be like, oh right, the skeleton's gonna come out of here, so let's hang back, or once we cross this thing is going to happen,
right? Or we also started taking advantage of like pits and cliffs, because like, oh, you can very easily knock some of these enemies like just off by jump kicking them or headbutting them as the dwarf into a pit, and we're like, oh, that's much better than wailing away at them.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. It's for as few things as the characters, for as limited as it is, it kind of makes a meal out of those limits.
I agree. And so I would say that I enjoyed playing this with you.
Yes.
I am not convinced that like I love Golden Axe or want to return to Golden Axe.
Yeah.
In a way that like Gunstar Heroes sounds awesome.
Ristar also sounds like a lot of fun.
But all that being said, I think it would be an infuriating day, but I think it would be very fun if you and I just like, I could imagine us spending an afternoon just like
trying and trying
until
again.
We like finished it.
We did try putting the game on the beginner mode to see if, because just to see the end of the game. And a couple things. The beginner mode, way too easy, right? Like just shockingly easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you any of the like between levels, like cutscene. They're not really cutscenes, but just like showing the map.
Vignettes.
Yeah. And it cuts off like halfway through. And it's like, you finished the beginner mode. Now go play the real game, you dork. It doesn't call you a dork. That's me editorializing. And we also discovered another thing that like I think helps just balance the game, is that you can change the amount of life that your characters have from 3 bars to 5 bars. And when we did that,
that was a huge game changer.
Yeah, and that means that we're giving ourselves almost 100% life bonus. But I think that's the way the game should be played if you can't pump infinite quarters into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also a duel mode in this game where you just fight each other one-on-one.
I do not have begrudging respect for duel mode.
No,
duel
me neither.
mode is just bad. It is not fun because combat in the game is not really fun.
No, but that's all the game is, though.
Yeah.
What was it? There was something that you were like trying to interact with, and you were like, oh yeah. No, here's what it was. Is like some enemies popped out, and we had to start fighting them, and you went like, ugh, like being frustrated that there were enemies to fight when that's literally the whole thing the game is. That's
right. It was like I kept getting upset when enemies would show up because I just wanted to walk through the rest of it. I guess I don't know.
I think I genuinely like the music in Golden Axe,
or
at least there are parts of the music that I like. We were singing the music of the dwarves, the tra la 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 la.
Yeah, the harpsichord part that you talked about
that's
earlier.
Right.
This sounds like the most realistic sample in the game. I don't think it probably is a sample, but
yeah, but it approximates it. And there's also the haunting music that plays on the map screen. I think that's really good. And there was some other like fanfare that was happening at one point that I was like, yeah, all right, like I'm feeling it. I feel like we are these epic fantasy heroes.
Yeah, I feel like I can understand why Golden Axe has such the reputation it does. I feel like if it's a game that I had owned, and I would have put a ton of time into it, and so the flaws that I see now, like it wouldn't have been as big of a deal when I was a kid, when I felt like I just had endless time,
right,
to spend on a game.
And I mean, even without endless time to spend on a game, even being 32 years removed from the release of this game, still fun to play with a friend.
Yeah, I did have a good time.
Yeah,
for sure.
32 years removed from the release of this game in 1989.
Pretty crazy.
All right, well, that was Gunstar Heroes, Ristar, and Golden Axe. Mark, let's close this out. And that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and follow us on Apple Podcasts. If you like the episode, share it with your Sega Genesis friends on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you share stuff. We appreciate it when you do. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell, and the show is at NinCart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com. or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thank you for listening.
I'm Brian Husky. I'm bald.
And I'm Charlie Sanders, and I'm also bald. And we host Bald Talk on the Campfire Media Network.
Bald Talk is the podcast where two bald comedians talk to anyone bald about being bald.
But this show isn't just for baldies, Brian. Heroes will love it too.
Bald Talk gets into vulnerability, vanity, insecurity, and self-acceptance, reminding us that we all have our respective bald spots. Not that bald spots are a bad thing.
No way. I mean, my entire head is one big bald spot.
It is one huge, beautiful bald spot, Charlie.
Get Bald Talk on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, I have like a little bit of hair, but not like you. Like, you're really bald.
I'm truly bald.
Great. I mean, it's
I'm
great.
balder than you.
You are balder than me.
Only on Bald Talk. Campfire.